Hi everyone and welcome to our 10th and sadly final Barrel Club tasting recorded here in the Distiller's Cottage in the heart of Midleton Distillery. We have a very special December tasting for you ahead of the festive season, inspired by the Midleton Distillery collection, featuring hopefully some of your favourite whiskies which are distilled and matured for your enjoyment from our home here in County Cork. My name is John Carroll, back as your host for the next hour, hour and a half or so. We're going to be looking back at some of the previous highlights from Barrel Club with a couple of very familiar faces guiding us through our tastings of the whiskies within your pack. And I'm thrilled to be joined by not one but two of our masters for our tasting. Our Master Distiller and face of Barrel Club, Kevin O'Gorman. Kevin, welcome back to Barrel Club and welcome back to Ireland and to Midleton. You've had a busy couple of months on your travels.
Yeah, thanks, John. It's been a busy few weeks, so first of all, it's great to be here in our 10th Barrel Club. But yeah, incredible few weeks.
Where have you been?
I suppose travel-wise, started off in France, in Cognac. We launched a very special Midleton Very Rare Follette de Trancé, which is a new release in the Midleton Very Rare family. So we had a wonderful time in Cognac for that launch. Again, a very special whiskey using very special oak from France, Trancé oak. So that was the start of it. Then been to London, we launched again a very special Jameson Caribbean Beats, which is a 21-year-old rum Jameson. So very, very special whiskey again. So that was a terrific launch.
It's part of a series, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a limited. It's a limited release, but it's part of the anthology. So there's two parts to the anthology. One is, I suppose, the remastered, where we're bringing back some old favourites. Yep. Like the Jameson 15 we launched maybe 2 years ago, and over the next few years you'll see some old favourites coming back. Not giving too much away.
No, can't.
And then there's the remix side, where we're kind of maybe pushing the boundaries of Jameson and doing something different. And the Caribbean Beats, the rum is part of that. So that was a 21-year-old Jameson. So really, really delighted with it. Great reviews, and it went really well. And most recently, I've been to Asia. Wow. I suppose just exploring the market out there with Billy Lighton. And we had a great trip. I went to Seoul and I went to Shanghai. And basically, it was very much focused on Jameson Black Barrel, Midleton Very Rare, and Redbreast. And we actually launched Redbreast 15 in Seoul again. So really, really great just to experience the whole, different cultures. And I suppose the interest and passion for whiskey out there is incredible.
And the potential, I'm sure, for Irish.
Potential is huge, yeah. And they love the Irish whiskey, and it really went down well. So incredible few weeks. And again, maybe finish off then last week with the launch of Dark Gaelach Kilranala from County Wicklow, yeah, which is the fifth release in the Dark Gaelach series, the Irish Oak. So it has been some few weeks, John. It's been I think incredible.
Did I see you on with Hector for that?
Yes, yeah. Hector. We did some work with Hector on the Kilranala Dark Gaelach. So we had Hector down here, and we were in Warehouse A2. We did some tastings, and I suppose explaining how we put together the Dark Gaelach Kilranala release. So yeah, that was good. Yeah, you kept an eye out on Instagram.
Yeah, look, I did. I saw it, and sure. Listen, whilst you were miles away from us, we were all able to keep a close eye Absolutely. On your excursions through your LinkedIn. I know you're very active.
Yeah, I do a bit, yeah.
But it looked amazing. So you were gone away from the family and away from the day job for a good,
it was probably 2 weeks in Asia. So yeah, it was a long spell away, but very, very good. I really enjoyed it. It's terrific.
Brilliant. Well, great to have you, and thanks again for your time. And it gives me great honour to also welcome back, but with a brand new title, our newly appointed Master Blender, Dave McCabe. Dave, congratulations, sincerely.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
wonderful
whirlwind the last few weeks.
Hot off the press.
Hot off the press, and I was trying to hold the fort while Kevin and Billy were away in Asia as well.
Yeah.
So, but great news. I must say, thrilled to bits. It's a bit of a lifetime, dream come true, to be honest. And the fact that Billy's still here as well is even better again. As he said himself, it's kind of giving me the steering wheel and he'll sit in the back for a while. So it's great to still have Billy around.
the dynamic duo continues.
Very much so, yeah.
Brilliant. So, because he'd stay with us as Master Blender Emeritus.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's not going anywhere. That's what
Great.
I'm telling people. But you know, he's still going to be involved in a lot of what we do, but kind of trying to pass over certain responsibilities that he's been, you know, most of his career at Irish Distillers handling. So it's not something you can just give up overnight either. So.
But exciting time for you because, and we'll talk about it in a couple of minutes, like when we last saw you together, actually, it was myself, yourself and Billy, and we were doing the last drop, our 9th Barrel Club drop, and you were going from that evening then to get married, I think, I recall.
Right. Yeah. So
congratulations as well. It's all happening for you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So big changes both at home and in work. So
it's brilliant. Well, listen, I know I'm speaking on behalf of everyone at Irish Distillers when the word went round. There was a really strong sense of just a goodwill and happiness for both yourself and Billy. So yeah, just over the moon. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. So we're over the moon for you.
Thank you very much.
And you've been super busy. Like while the lads were away, you were.
Yeah, like
keeping the fort.
Yeah, you'd like to think you were winding down for Christmas, but with so many projects,
it's winding
on
up,
the go, we're winding up.
Winding up.
You know, there's lots of innovations, lots of projects, things in the pipeline, and as you know yourself, when you're in the whiskey industry, pipelines are years in the making. So it's, you know, you have the day job of producing whiskies on a regular basis, but planning for the future as well. So no, we've been keeping busy, which is good.
No, brilliant. And listen, it's an honour, and thanks a mil for your time. We're recording literally just before the Barrel Club pack, this 10th pack drops with our members, and I think both of your schedules on the run up to Christmas will probably give the gang in the North Pole a good run for its money. So hence we found this little window of opportunity in the Distiller's Cottage in Midleton, and yeah, we're going to bring the pack to life. And you may recall that our last live broadcast, as I mentioned there with Dave, came from the new Midleton Distillery experience, the heart and soul of Irish whiskey. And that project was the culmination of many years of hard work by our team here in Midleton. But sadly, exactly 2 weeks after that show, Ireland was hit by Storm Babette, and Midleton unfortunately experienced unprecedented and devastating levels of rainfall, which completely flooded the town and our new distillery experience. And as you can see, the whole area suffered considerable flood damage, and we were no exception, being located on the banks of the Dungurney River, also our source of water to make our whiskies. And like many other businesses and homes in the area, the damage to our buildings was extensive. But we are working very hard to rebuild and to open and reopen our doors again to the public by spring of 2024. In the meantime, we're delighted to say our temporary brand home has reopened its doors once again, welcoming visitors from near and far. And this temporary experience is fully stocked with all of our most loved products and merchandise, and has been cosily decorated for the festivities. I was up there earlier and there's a lovely feel in the place. We would encourage you to visit Midleton and shop local. And if you do, be sure to pop in and say hi to us. Also, we will be hosting tours in that space, something really nice to do over the Christmas break. As I mentioned, the theme of this pack, our final tasting, centres around the Midleton Distillery collection, which brings together, celebrates and shares 7 of Ireland's best loved whisky brands with the whole of the world. Over the past 2.5 years, we've introduced you to new whiskies as well as current favourites. And I hope, and we hope, we've opened your minds and indeed your palates to the wide range of whiskies that we produce here in Midleton. From Jameson to Powers, to the Spot range to Redbreast, Method and Madness, and of course not forgetting the wonderful tasting we had of Napogue Castle Single Malt Irish Whiskey earlier on in the year in March. Many of these whiskies are available for you to select online and have delivered to your door through the Midleton Distillery collection. Now, we thought we'd bring you something very special indeed this evening. All of the whiskies you will be tasting are exclusive to Barrel Club. Familiar expressions perhaps to some of you, but all bottled at cask strength for your enjoyment, which is a real treat indeed. So let's explore the selection of whiskies included in your pack, and we'll unpack, and which you should have lined up on your tasting mat working from left to right. So our first sample is a 50 ml sample of Jameson Single Pot Still Irish whiskey, again at cask strength as we mentioned. Our second sample is our Redbreast first fill Oloroso sherry cask. Our third sample is our Powers Rye Irish whiskey, cask strength again of course. And all finally culminating with the hero bottle of our pack and our tasting. It's the Green Spot Chateau Montelena cask strength. As always, we hope you're tuned in from somewhere comfortable with the Christmas tree up and the lights on and the mince pies and a friend or two around to enjoy the tasting. Please be sure to have some water like we have ourselves here on hand to sip as we progress through the tasting. We really do want to make sure that you enjoy the tasting responsibly. So let's start with our first whiskey, one that we first introduced to Barrel Club members back in 2022 and which later became a permanent expression in the Midleton Distillery collection. And that was our Jameson Single Pot Still Irish whiskey. And featuring in this broadcast from September of that year, Kevin, you were joined by Deirdre O'Carroll, one of our blenders, and Kevin Rowan from our team at Jameson Distillery, Bow Street in Dublin. And Kevin, you took us through the inspiration behind this release. Can you give us a recap for anyone who missed that particular show?
Yeah, so our first whiskey tonight, John, of course, this is, again, it's exclusive. It's very special. And I think, as you said already, all our whiskies tonight, they are exclusive. And there's a lot of, I suppose, thought and work and craft gone into these. So I hope everybody at home enjoys them. But our first one, yeah, so this one is our Jameson Single Pot Still, which, as you say, we launched as a permanent expression late last year. Just to give a little bit of background first, which we went through on the Barrel Club last year, but I suppose up to 1968, Jameson was what we call a pure pot still, or it's now called a single pot still. Which was made in Bow Street. It became a blend in 1968. And I suppose the reason it became a blend of grain and pot was down really to changing tastes, changing styles. And there was just a move away from the whole pure pot still, single pot still. And it has, Jameson Original has been a blend ever since, which is your grain whiskey and your pot whiskey, using predominantly American oak barrels and Oloroso sherry barrels. So when I suppose we're looking at single pot still a number of years ago and doing a Jameson single pot still, I suppose really it's a throwback to the era before 1968 when Jameson was a single pot still, and we used that as an inspiration for bringing back the Jameson single pot still. I suppose a few connections with Jameson Original. So within Jameson Original, we use a specific type of single pot still, which we call a medium style, which has a particular flavour and aroma. So you know the whiskey that we used in this Jameson single pot still is 100% that particular style of whiskey, which is a medium style pot still. So that's the first thing to remember. The next thing is that we use 5 different cask types in the makeup of this whiskey. So it's very, very complex, very intricate, and I suppose a lot of blending goes into it. Dave, as you can vouch for this.
And what are the 5?
So the 5 cask type, we have ex-American bourbon barrels, we have ex-Oloroso sherry, and they are in Jameson Original, so that's a kind of a link to Jameson Original in any case. But we have added a twist here whereby we've added 3 what we call new or virgin oak casks, namely Virgin American oak, virgin Spanish oak, and we also have a lovely touch of virgin Irish oak.
Wow.
Okay, so 5 cask types, single pot still whiskey, medium style pot still. It's cask strength, so it's 60.5%. And I suppose it's very special in the sense that when we put together a batch of this last year, we took some of that batch and we put it into a cask. Okay, so we left it in a cask. So this is actually from a specific cask. So I suppose this is really, really special for anybody at home, because as well as being Jameson Single Pot Still at cask strength, which is 60.5%, it also has an extra almost 12 to 13 months almost finishing in refill American bourbon barrels as well. Wow. So it's very, very special. And suffice to say that the standard Jameson Single Pot Still, which you can buy in shops, that's at 46%. So this is, I suppose, very, very unique, very, very special. So cask strength, extra finishing period, and it's a single cask. And I think that's how we put it together. So very, very, very special.
And the nice inclusion of Irish oak, where's that oak sourced from?
Yeah, so that's oak that we felled a number of years ago. It's from Ballydowling Wood in Glenealy, County Wicklow. And we collaborated there with Quilcha on that. So again, that was a very, very special felling that day. And that's the oak that we're using in the Jameson Single Pot Still. So a lovely link to Wicklow, to Irish oak, and the inclusion of Irish oak is very, very good as well.
And how does that differ from the previous Dark Gaelic by way of that sourcing of oak?
Yeah, so Dark Gaelic, I suppose, first of all, that is a single pot still whiskey as well. Yeah. So both are single pot still. But with Dark Gaelic, we collaborate with individual farmers, forest owners. That's the first thing. Okay. Whereas this is Quilcha. Okay. The second thing is that Dark Gaelic, each bottle is traceable to an individual tree number, whereas we haven't done that with this. Okay. So this is where we felled a number of trees, and the collection of those barrels goes forward to the makeup of Jameson Single Pot Still. So there are a few, I suppose, key differences with Dark Gaelic and Jameson Single Pot Still Irish oak. And
did you resurrect, and the team, kind of an old mash bill from yesteryear?
Well, the mash bill on this would be barley and malted barley. So that's our typical single pot still mash bill in Midleton. And if you go back to the 50s, 60s in Bow Street, for example, they would have been using malted barley. They would have been using barley. And they would have been using other cereals that would be available as well. For example, they might have been using small amounts of oats or small amounts of rye. Okay. But I suppose it does reflect the use of barley and malted barley, even going back to the 50s, 60s and 70s.
And we'll mention the rye in a few minutes' time.
We'll mention the rye in a few minutes' time.
Brilliant.
So we have maybe
would you do us the honour? Would you, please, Kevin? Thank you.
So again, just to recap, I suppose it is cask strength, just to be aware of that when you're doing your nosing.
We've mentioned this on the previous shows in terms of water and the benefits of unlocking some of the flavour, but particularly maybe with cask strength whiskies. Yeah, well, what I suggest is that with the cask strength whiskies, which we're tasting tonight, you get an intensity of flavour. So all those flavour compounds, be it wood driven or distillate driven, you have an intensity of those flavours with the cask strength. So what I would suggest tonight is that we will nose and taste at the cask strength, and then I think we'll add a little drop of water. Now, people at home, if they wish, they can add a drop of water. But basically what it does is that when you reduce the strength down, it tends to open up the whiskey and allows more compounds to be released, particularly esters and fruity compounds. And the reason that happens is that when you bring the alcoholic strength down, it releases some of those esters and flavour compounds which are trapped within the alcohol. So that's what happens. So it does make quite a difference. So what I'd suggest first is we'll have a nose. Yeah. Thick legs on it. Yeah. So just have a nose. So initially I get a lot of honeycomb. It's quite a honeyed nose. It's very spicy. Like you get honey. There's a lot of wood spices. It's quite spicy. And again, typical with single pot still whiskey, which our whiskies are famous for, is that spiciness. Yeah. Be it pepper, cinnamon. You get cinnamon and nutmeg. Citrusy. Yeah, there's a little touch of citrus. Maybe apple, pear. And again, that medium style of pot still whiskey that we do has lovely orchard fruits and ripe apple. And if you go a bit deeper there, you get that sort of orchard fruits and apple. Lovely fudge. Yeah. Touch of butterscotch. And maybe a little touch of, there's a kind of a nutty note coming through as well, be it hazelnuts, I would say. And that's at
60.5%. Yeah. Okay, so we'll have a taste.
Yeah, you've teased us with that now.
Sláinte.
Happy Christmas.
So, again, even though it's 60.5, very, very luscious. And again, typical with single pot still whiskey, has a lovely creaminess, right? Very creamy, but wonderful spices on the taste. I would say pepper, yeah.
Nutmeg as well.
Nutmeg, there's very lovely spices on the taste. And then after a while, the spices fade.
It's very silky.
Very silky. It rolls in there with caramel and butterscotch, and the fudge that you get on the nose comes through in the taste as well. And then it comes back to the fruit again, and then it finishes almost like a lovely barley cereal biscuity finish, I would say, on the finish. So it really, really delicious.
I think what's interesting with that as well is when we made the batch initially and we moved it back into a particular barrel, as Kevin mentioned, it was a refill barrel as opposed to a fresh, you know, Irish oak barrel or a fresh bourbon barrel. This was a barrel that's been used a number of times because we put all the work in making this particular bespoke whiskey that's aged in bourbon, sherry, Virgin Irish, Virgin European, and Virgin American. You know, the oak, the wood has done its part, you know, that by taking it and moving it back into a refill barrel, we're letting all those whiskies just marry and kind of, you know, merge and just, you know, come together without any further enhancement of oak. It didn't need it, you know, and I think it's evident there after another 12, 13 months of resting in that barrel. It's kind of the sum of the parts can be seen now even greater without extra oak on top of it again.
It was that marrying period really of the sort of 12, 13 months,
And
just bringing all that complexity.
Is that the peak period?
Well, I mean, we felt that this was really the right time now. You know, it was a lovely, lovely finishing period, and it, you know,
for Barrel Club, we thought it'd be something special.
Yeah.
And you know, it's different to the offering at the 46%, not only at the cask strength, but that extra period of aging as well.
So I might just suggest we just add a little drop of water, even at home if you wish. Just maybe add a little drop.
I stuck a drop in there.
Okay. So what's happening here now, again, is you can see the alcohol strength is coming down.
Yeah.
You give it a swirl, and then some of those aromas and compounds that are trapped within the higher alcohol are now released.
By doing that really stupid question, which I tend to ask, as you gentlemen know well, but even by adding the water in there, is that immediately reducing then the ABV on it?
Oh yeah, it's come down, absolutely.
So
absolutely. It's hard to guess here now without measuring.
Points,
It's down maybe 5-10%. Yeah,
okay.
It's like, technically, if you added the amount you have of whiskey, if you added half that or doubled it with water, you're reducing the strength by half exactly. Okay. So like in the lab for us, when we're nosing samples on a daily basis, we tend to reduce everything to about 20%. Again, as Kevin said, that it helps open up the aromas, but also when you're nosing, could be 50, 60 samples in a day.
Tough gig.
Sometimes you don't want to burn out your nose from that high level of alcohol.
So would you'd reduce everything?
Down to 20%.
Yeah.
And you can really, I suppose, pick out or pinpoint flavour compounds then at that lower strength.
Wow.
Reduce the alcohol. So all our assessments of whiskey are done at 20%.
Typical day, what, dozens of nosings?
Just depends on the day. Like, you know, if we were making this now for bottling tomorrow, we'd sample all the sherry casks, all the Virgin American, the Spanish oak and the Irish, select which casks kind of meet the criteria essentially from flavour point of view, and sign them off to go into the making of this. That won't be every day obviously, but the days you're making the whiskies for bottling, they're the days you're kind of heavily nosing.
And if you nose it now, John, I mean, to me, those fruits, and even you mentioned citrus, the apple, the orchard fruits are much more pronounced at the reduced strength.
It's very zesty, isn't it?
Yeah, and I get lots of ripe apple now. Pear.
Yeah, like a sweet
and
pear.
a little touch of banana even, but it has changed quite a lot with the addition of the water. So we taste again, Sláinte.
Sláinte.
And I suppose just to maybe clarify as well for the people at home, John, that I've mentioned here the medium style pot still whiskey that we produce. So just to maybe explore that a little bit, in Midleton here we can do, we produce single pot still whiskey, we produce single grain whiskey, and we can also produce some single malt whiskey. But within the single pot still style of whiskey that we produce, we can produce different styles of that particular whiskey, from a kind of a heavier traditional style to a medium style, which we have here, to a lighter, more elegant style of pot still whiskey.
There's a range.
So there's a range, and we do that by adjusting the cuts on our distillation runs, and by varying the center cut. So that gives us, an enormous range of different whiskies to work with, and the blenders like Dave, the permutations are huge. But when I'm talking here about a medium style whiskey, suffice to say, we also have a traditional style, we have a lighter style. And if I go back to something like the Jameson 15 Remastered, which we spoke about earlier on, that was very much driven by a traditional, we went quite heavy on the heavier style, and we included more of the heavier traditional style of whiskey, which really was a throwback to the days of Jameson back in the 60s, which back then would be seen as a very much traditional, heavier, oilier, more robust style of whiskey. And that's how we did it.
And of course we celebrated the diversity of single pot still whiskies on our second Barrel Club drop, which would have been, correct me here if I'm wrong, would it be September or December of 2 years ago now?
Yeah.
Great.
I'm after travelling for the last few weeks, so
you've lost all
I've lost sense of time.
Of time and place.
Yeah. So look, it's wonderful whiskey, very special, and hopefully everybody at home and just enjoys it for what it is.
The cask strength as well. Nice piece of dark chocolate, quality dark chocolate, delicious for Christmas.
Yeah, absolutely. So
really good.
Lovely.
Like Dave. I won't ask you your favourite just yet of the four. We'll do that at the end. It's exceptional. Really good.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Hope everyone has enjoyed that at home. Thanks a million, Kevin, for taking us and kicking us off, taking us through the first one. Now, all of the whiskies in your pack are bottled at cask strength, as we've mentioned, to bring a different dimension to the tasting and more intensity at the higher strength. And back in June, Deirdre O'Carroll, one of our blenders here, a colleague of David and Kevin, took us through the art of blending and spoke in some detail about ABV in whiskey production. Before we taste our second whiskey, let's remind ourselves of how our blenders select whiskies at different strengths for bottling.
So to make a new make pot still spirit, we triple distill our mash bill of malted and unmalted barley, and that gives us a spirit that's spicy, aromatic, robust, and it comes off our stills at 84% ABV. ABV stands for alcohol by volume. And then this is reduced prior to going into cask to 63.4% ABV. Similarly, in grain whiskey, we are still triple distilling, but it's a mash bill of malted barley and maize, and it's in our vertical column stills, and that comes off the stills at 94% ABV, and it's reduced down to 70% ABV prior to going into the cask. So when it's actually in the cask, a lot of reactions are taking place. So there's additive, we're getting loads of flavour and colour from the wood. There's subtractive, so if there happens to be any undesirable, like sometimes sulphur, that can be stripped away from the char within the wood. And then there's interactive, so that is the wood working with the spirit and also oxygen, because the wood is porous, getting in there and creating new flavour components. So that's all happening in the cask, but also there's evaporation, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, but the strength can also alter, and the strength changes due to either temperature or humidity. So we're very fortunate in Midleton and Dungourney, where our warehouses are, that the temperature actually remains constant throughout well, not constant, but there's very little fluctuation between the seasons, as opposed to different countries like America or India. But it is a very humid country that we live in, and there's a lot of moisture in the air, and therefore there's an affinity then to take alcohol out of the liquid, so the alcohol strength drops over time. So all these reactions are taking place, and it's a minimum of 3 years before it can even be called whiskey. However, let's say if we have a pot still whiskey at 12 years old, there's no real rule of thumb at what strength that's going to be. It tends to, in the early days, lose strength quite quickly, and then it tends to taper off as it gets older and older. So this is a cask strength whiskey if nothing else happens to it. So within this cask we have alcohol molecules, we have water molecules, and we also have flavour compounds. And these are all arranged in a particular composition. And if you're adding further water to drop the strength to bottling strength of 40% or 46%, you're actually changing the composition of these compounds. And therefore you're naturally going to have different flavours, different aromas coming through. So people tend to like cask strength whiskies, and they tend to be people who really want to know their whiskies and want to learn a little bit more about them, because there's the least amount of interaction with that whiskey. It comes out of the cask. Yes, it might be filtered, but it goes straight into a bottle. And it also gives an opportunity for everyone who's tasting to become their own blender, so they can add little drops of water and determine at what flavour compound that they enjoy the most, and keep it at that.
An excellent insight from Deirdre there, as always. And as you may recall, our theme in September was Redbreast returning home, and the response to the tasting by our viewers was overwhelmingly positive. It was a great show, great occasion that night, Dave, you'll recall. With Billy. So much so that Kevin, Dave and the team here in Midleton have bottled a real treat for you in your pack. A Redbreast Single Pot Still whiskey aged in a first fill Oloroso sherry cask. And Dave, you're going to kindly do the honours for our second tasting.
So, you know, when everyone thinks of Redbreast, sherry casks are kind of the main type of cask that would be synonymous with the brand. And I suppose from a blending point of view, we're using those barrels or casks to emphasize certain flavors that can be seen throughout the range of Redbreast, which are the dried fruits, the nutty character, you know, Christmas cake, as people would often say, which is a fitting time of year to talk about it now.
Of course, which we celebrated for this drop last year.
That's right, yeah, with an actual Redbreast Christmas cake offering. So what we decided to showcase this evening was, you know, a single pot still whiskey aged and matured in a sherry cask, a first fill Oloroso. And this whiskey was laid down in 2009. And what we're showing to people here with the Barrel Club is this offering a cask strength again. And why we picked this type of barrel for Redbreast, as you know, as I was pointing out, but from 2009 as well, that's a typical kind of year of make that we'd be using now in Redbreast 12. So when it comes to Redbreast 12, we're using whiskies that are 12 years minimum, but we do use whiskies that are 13 and 14 years of age as well. Bourbon barrels will make up actually a greater percentage of the barrels in the formula, but it's the sherry casks that we feel are I suppose the driving force and the foundation that goes into that kind of dried fruit nutty character you find in Redbreast. The casks themselves are produced in Spain, down in the very southwest, in a place called Jerez de la Frontera. And they're... and
that was our very first Barrel Club pack, was the influence of Spanish oak.
That's right.
And we heard from Paco and the team there. We did a bit of a link up with them. How are they all keeping?
They're great.
You hear from them?
Yeah, we've been in contact the whole time. And Paco has actually since retired. Yeah, so he still pops in every so often. Yeah. We were chatting to Antonio and Isaac, and Paco would still come in because his English is just superb, and he still would have contacts with the likes of ourselves and other distilleries and things like that. And he actually came over with his wife Macarena after he retired, so we just wanted to show him how much we appreciated the work that he's put in, And even being on the Barrel Club that time, you know, like the lengths that Paco would go to for us was just phenomenal. So
it was amazing. It was great to hear about and see the operation, and you could just see the passion and enthusiasm and actually the sense of, when you boil it all down, like friendship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Between, you know.
Well, it's gone on, I suppose, what, 35, even maybe more now, years, collaboration with Antonio Paez, and Paco has been a central part of that. So yeah, so he's retired, and we had a great evening, we had dinner, and
no doubt you shot a great time here.
Oh, we did, yeah. But he's been very good to us, and the whole Antonio Paez collaboration has been wonderful to us on all fronts. Even the Irish oak, which we spoke about earlier on, they're a central part of producing those casks, and that's the reason initially we went with those guys, is that they know so much, the quality, their attention to detail, and they're wonderful to work with.
And it's that relationship that we have with them is why we can make great whiskies today, like what's in our glass here, because it's the quality of their casks that they produce. It's the quality of the Oloroso wine that goes into those casks for seasoning that then come to us, and we fill them with new make spirit and we leave them age. And you know, it's just a relationship that helps define what we do here in Midleton. So while we make Irish whiskey, it's really you know, so many influences from people all over the world that help us create what we define as Irish whiskey. And that's why we always will acknowledge them in everything we do when it comes to talking about sherry casks. So in this instance now, while the spirit was laid down in 2009, it would have been about 2005 that those casks were actually ordered, because there's no market for sherry barrels out there. You actually have to go and figure out from a blending and distilling point of view, what are we going to be making for the future in terms of spirit, and how much that spirit needs to go into X amount of barrels from America, Y amount of sherry casks from Spain, Madeira casks, port casks. So we'd go to Paco and to Antonio back in 2005 and say, for 2009, we're going to need so many thousand of sherry butts. So they'll source the wood, they'll lay them out in their yard, the cut staves, unfinished staves they're called, or just logs nearly. Leave them air dry naturally for about kind of 16 to 18 months, and that just helps bring the moisture in the wood down to a level that the coopers can then work with to turn them into casks. So you're talking a year and a half of just natural air drying. Then the casks are made, and then they're sent over to the bodega just around the corner and filled with Oloroso wine, and they're left there for another 2 years. So by the time they actually have been ordered to the time they come back to Midleton, there's about a 4-year time lag. So if we're thinking about Redbreast 12, we're thinking about Redbreast 12 in 16 years' time. What's the demand for Redbreast 12? Because we have to order the casks now to arrive in 4 years to age for another 12.
So they're made to order?
They're made to order.
So you really are hedging your bets?
You are, and I guess you can only hedge your bets with the information you get from the markets, what the demand is, what we expect the demand to be, and maybe try and put a little bit extra on top of that in case sales go higher than you planned, but not too high that if sales don't go as well and you're having a lake of whiskey. So it's a balancing act. But
and then when they fill those casks with wine, do they sell directly, or they sell the wine off? Do they bottle them?
It's very interesting what they do with the wine actually, because every year they'll have another set of casks to be seasoned. They don't sell all their wine and they don't use it all. What they'll do is they'll actually take out a proportion of the wine, about a third, and they'll turn that into sherry wine or even the likes of sherry vinegar. And what they'll do is they'll have a fresh third of new Oloroso wine and they'll mix it with the other 2 parts. And that's the next batch that goes into our next round of casks that need seasoning. And that's a Spanish tradition actually, because when you think of Spanish sherry wine, they have a system called the Solera system. So what they'll do is they'll age maybe 3 rows of their barrels stacked on racks. And what they do is every year they'll take out wine from the bottom row, which is called the Criadera row. They'll take out a third of the wine from those barrels and bottle it. So those barrels on the bottom row are actually only 2/3 full now. So they'll take the wine from the middle row, a third from that to top up the bottom row. They'll take it from the top row, then they'll take some wine and fill the middle row back to full. And then their freshest, latest harvested wine is what is filled into the top row. So they're always just taking a third from each level to fill back up their barrels, and they're only bottling a third if that makes sense. It's a bit
Sounds like
convoluted.
a good system, but it works for them.
It works for them,
Yeah,
and it's kind of the same system with how our wine is treated as well. So that's how it works with the family. And as you know, some of our barrels go to Lustow for seasoning with their wine as well.
Yeah.
Hence Redbreast Lustow. But so we thought we'd share a single cask, sherry aged, and would be quintessentially a Redbreast style, almost like a deconstruction, if you will. So this is bottled here today at 59.7.
Yeah.
And as Kevin was referring to the different styles of spirits that we produce in our pot stills, this would be the lighter style.
Okay.
But if you want to have a nose first of all and see what you think.
And at a glance, is it the darkest in terms of colour?
What we have here?
Of the four, looks
It would be,
Yeah.
the darkest would tend to be sherry wine
Sherry.
casks, or also virgin wine casks as well.
I suppose the thing there as well is that in terms of the colour, you know, European oak or Spanish oak or Portuguese oak, because it's, you know, it's Kirkus Robur, it's quite different, but it would have a lot more colour
Okay.
and tannins and even flavour than, say, for example, American oak. So if you had the equivalent age here now of an American oak,
Yeah.
it would be much lighter in
Okay.
colour. This is quite dark.
Yeah.
It's really, really dark, sort of mahogany colour.
Yeah.
And that's really coming as well as the seasoning process.
Yeah.
The oak plays a huge
Okay.
part as well.
Bursting with, I'm getting berries and cherries.
Yeah, like black cherry now,
Yeah.
or even sugar glazed cherry, black currants. Think of raisins as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the raisins, sultanas. Yeah.
And we talk about kind of a nutty character as well, and think of maybe almonds or marzipan type of character as well.
Wonderful nose.
Yeah.
Again, it's
Complex.
Figs.
Christmas cake is always just
Figs
a
and raisins
catch-all
and
kind of
yeah.
terminology, but it's very apt. You know, we talked about cinnamon and nutmeg with the Jameson pot still, and I would say there's a little bit of that nutmeg here as well.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, when we talk about Redbreast, that would be what you'd find synonymous with Redbreast, particularly Redbreast 12. That is the backbone of it. So we're extracted it, if you will, for this offering here.
What a treat.
But if you want to have a taste and
Yeah, thank
see
you.
what you think.
Sláinte.
Sláinte.
Wonderful spice and fruit.
That's very
Delicious.
spicy, isn't it?
Pep-
Really is.
Sort of pepper,
Yeah.
kind of black pepper.
And dry. There's a nice tannic kind of level, like black tea or red wine to it at the start as well, but soft.
Yeah,
Definitely pepper.
yeah.
The raisins are actually kind of expose themselves a bit more now. Very sweet and almost juicy, if you will, as well.
And dark chocolate, probably kind of a dark chocolate, the taste.
Yeah, like that kind of little cacao nib,
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
chocolate powder, dark chocolate bitter. If you want to try a bit of water as well, and see what you think.
A little touch of water.
The black currants are almost gone kind of like a treacle syrup now type of character.
Sláinte again.
Sláinte again. You've spoiled us here now with these forecast strength.
Delicious.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting to show people cask strength, and then they can add as much or as little water as they like then themselves, which is a nice little project as well.
Yeah.
I think it's been great as well, Dave, working with the guys in Spain on the whole sourcing of the oak and the certification of oak as well. It's a project we've been running for 10 years now. You know, where all our oak in, say, France and Spain, and the guys in Jerez, probably I'd say next year, certainly in 2 years, all the oak, all the Oloroso sherry butts that we get are what we call fully certified. It's called PEFC certified, which is the Program for Endorsement of Forest Certification,
Okay.
which is a worldwide standard for certification. So I'd say within the next 2 years, the majority, probably nearly 100%, will be they'll be coming to Midleton actually fully certified,
Wow.
which has been a huge step. And the collaboration with Antonio Boy has made all that possible, because there's a lot of work in this in terms of the certification process, the sourcing of the oak, going up to Galicia and working with the sawmills and all the forest owners. So it's been a great project.
Yeah.
So I think it's nice to mention that as well.
That'll
It's
be
a huge step.
a huge
Yeah.
achievement, I think. Once,
Yeah, no, it's brilliant.
When will that come to fruition?
Probably the next 2 years, I'd say.
Okay.
Will be probably there. 2 to 3 years, I'd say, we'll be fully there and
job.
fully certified,
Well
which
done.
is brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we can trace back to a cask number, can't we, on
We can.
all?
This
Yeah.
particular cask is a 28495. So
I love the way you just computed that.
I wish it was that easy. So
Yeah, it smells like 28495.
you know, this cask, like on our system, which is like a spirit management kind of platform,
Yeah.
we know exactly where this cask was before Barrel Club.
Yeah.
We knew what warehouse it was in all the time, what year it was filled. And we would have an estimation of what's left in the barrel since it began aging. And that helps us determine how many of those types of barrels we need to use to make a batch of Redbreast. So we have to make sure that we've enough of that now that's 11 years of age for next year, enough of that that's 10 years of age for 2 years' time for Redbreast. So when you think of Redbreast 27,
Yeah.
you know, what we might be filling as new make into the next sherry casks coming in from Spain, we'll be leaving a proportion of them alone, put to bed, as they say, until they're 27 years of age.
Wow.
So we might
So
be
then-
hopefully here still to make it.
You
but
will. You will.
We'll see.
And so the number has significance in terms of for forecasting, for inventory management, and then quality and assurance, I presume, on top.
And traceability.
Traceability, yeah.
You might get asked from an auditing point of view to show what barrels were used to make that product.
Yeah.
And we can trace back to the barrel, to every barrel used to make that particular batch, based on the label on the bottle.
Amazing. I think we were mentioning on the last show when we were celebrating Redbreast, we'd had a couple of launches, hadn't we, within the Redbreast family?
That's right, back in September.
Yeah.
Was our most recent, well, our second most recent launch
Yeah,
actually.
Tawny.
It was the Tawny
Port.
yeah, part of the Iberian series.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a limited release offering that we might do every kind of 2 years. Redbreast Listau was the main driving force behind that, which is an ongoing kind of offering, but it's to do with the influence on our whiskies from barrels from the Iberian region. Listau being the first one, which we launched back in 2016. And since that, we've launched a Redbreast that was finished in Pedro Jimenez wine casks. These are casks casks that have held wine made from the PX or the Pedro Jimenez grape. Very sweet, very viscous type of wine, very treacle-like syrupy.
Yeah.
So we made a batch of Redbreast which we finished in those barrels or casks, and that was say 2020, now 2021. And the latest and greatest is the Tawny Port release. So Tawny Port from the Douro Valley in Portugal, and we would have worked with a winemaker over there, Jose Pinheiro, who manages our cask seasoning program over there for both Tawny and Ruby Port casks. So we've been accumulating a certain amount of Tawnies every year, and again that's from the Iberian region, and we thought they'd be a great way to showcase their influence on something like Redbreast. And I think Redbreast 27 aging in Ruby Port had laid the path to say using Tawnies isn't too much of a diversion for Redbreast. So slightly innovative for Redbreast, but not too left of field. And that was back in September. So myself and Billy had the pleasure of going to the Douro
I saw the holiday snaps. It was a great
to
trip.
promote it, which was great.
Amazing.
So
And that sold, didn't it?
it did,
I
yeah.
think you'll do very well to secure yourself a bottle of.
You would,
Yeah.
small volumes,
Yeah.
and Tawny casks actually are smaller casks than you would think, like our port casks and our Oloroso casks. They're butts, they're 500 litres in capacity.
What's a Tawny?
The Tawnies are hogsheads, so
Okay.
they're 225 to 250 litres.
Okay.
But we're accumulating
So
them again.
similar to a bourbon, no?
Similar to bourbon, slightly
Yeah.
bigger.
Yeah.
Similar to our Irish oak hogsheads for Jameson Pot Still. So yeah, we're just travelling around, working with suppliers, seeing what other casks might be out there in that region that would bode well for the likes of Redbreast. So every couple of years, hopefully, we'll plan on doing another Iberian release.
So there's no point in me asking in terms of what's coming down the line. You're not going to be able to
No
tell
point,
me.
John.
It's not Christmas yet.
No point.
You're not getting that present. So I hope people at home like this one.
Yeah.
And you know, again, it's a very much Redbreast-driven style of whiskey.
Well, I think Redbreast is certainly many people's favourites. I know personally it's one of mine, and what a stunning whiskey, and one that should remain on the mind and on the palate, no doubt, for a good while. And our tasting experience today is made for us all the more special, enjoying it here in the beautiful building together in the Distiller's Cottage, as I said at the outset, in the heart of Midleton Distillery. It's a building steeped in history and great significance, I think, for Midleton, Kevin.
Yeah, look, this is a very, very special place, John. And I suppose it's very apt that our 10th and final Barrel Club is coming from this special room. So I suppose the Cottage, in terms of history, goes back to the late 1700s, when Marcus Lynch set up this place as a woolen mills, this site here in Midleton, and this cottage was built back in the late 1700s, and you know the Lynches would have resided here. They call it a cottage, but like there was 24 rooms back then. It was quite a sizable cottage. So the Lynches would have resided here, and then you know this place shut down as a woolen mills, and it became an army barracks in the early 1800s. And during that time, this place would have been the officers' quarters or the officers' mess, where I suppose decisions of the day were made and all that. And
so
then
didn't reside here. It was kind of like
it was
the
an officers' meeting rooms,
yeah.
lots of meetings, lots of big decisions, I suppose, made in terms because it was an army barracks. And then I suppose the next big change was in 1825 when the Murphy family took over this place and set up a distillery. And ever since, you know, from 1825 on, then the distillers of the day would have resided in this building, and that would have continued on for many, many years. And in fact, Barry Crockett, one of our Master Distiller Emeritus, who retired in 2013, he was actually brought up in this cottage. And in fact, there's two windows just here to my left.
Yeah.
Those two windows, they are actually they were in Barry's bedroom.
Wow.
So that was his bedroom here.
Wow.
So a lot
of course his father Max before him. Yeah.
Yeah, Father Max. So the Crockett's would have lived here. There was also other families that would have resided here as well. The Dailies, for example, who would have worked in the distillery, they lived here as well. So it was a busy place in terms of family life. Also, Carol Quinn tells me lots of stories. I think the Dailies were big, you know, animal lovers, between dogs and cats, and apparently they had a tame otter that used to run around the cottage as well, as you do. So Carol was telling me that story. And another interesting story, actually, the mill wheel is just opposite out here, the front.
Window there, yeah.
And there's two trees there alongside the mill wheel, and Barry's engraved, when he was a small boy, he engraved his initials in that tree. So if you look very carefully,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think it's kind of the tree has kind of outgrown it now, but
wow.
There's just a little vague imprint. So he put his imprint on that tree outside. So look, lots of stories, lots of history, wonderful place, and I suppose there's a great sense of history and heritage here. I think you can pick it up the minute you walk in the door. There's something.
And I think the way it's just so beautifully nestled amongst all of the old buildings.
Yeah. And as well, I suppose the archive is here now as well. So
I was going to. You mentioned Carol. So Carol is based in here, adjacent to us.
Yeah, it's just down the corridor, and so the archive is here. So it's a state-of-the-art archive room, where everything going back to the 1700s is here, and it's an amazing place. Just the history and. Spending some time down here with Carol is an amazing experience.
And
really
some of the artifacts and I suppose the physical touch points of our brands and our business through the years are all contained within there. And I mentioned at the start, very sadly, about the flooding. You know, a lot of the buildings were damaged and destroyed, and they're under repair now. And there's a photograph. I don't think we're going to show it, but there's a photograph taken from the front door step
That's right.
of all the water in on the lawn here, and literally came up to the front door to the step, and it didn't make its way in, thankfully. Now I know, you know, lots of other businesses and homes in the area weren't as fortunate, but in the case of the cottage here, it didn't breach the door.
Yeah, we're very lucky.
It literally came in. So,
very lucky. Absolutely.
Because I know Carol's sitting on an awful lot of rich history for the brand.
So yeah, it's great. We're lucky. Yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. And we saw Barry actually at the opening of the new distillery experience back in late September. He seemed in great fettle.
Yeah, absolutely.
He's keeping very well.
He's keeping well. I met him a few weeks ago. He launched a book which he co-wrote with. It's a book about the Wises, the distilling family in Cork.
Yeah.
And he co-wrote the book with one of the Wises. And so we had a book launch, and Barry's keeping really well.
Brilliant.
Keeping very busy, as you can see, writing books. So he's doing really well.
A wonderful man and a legend of our industry.
Absolutely.
And our and given that was his bedroom, we better make sure we put all of this back and not have Barry Crockett on our case.
Well, this is the good room.
This is the
very
good room.
It's the good room.
Yeah. Okay, we'll move on. Back in March 2022, we hosted our tasting upstairs in the iconic Palace Bar in Dublin City with the wonderful Willie Ahern, bringing to life a Powers Johns Lane deconstructed. Now, almost 2 years on, we have a completely different expression of Powers included in your pack for you to enjoy. Born from careful experimentation, our Powers Rye Irish whiskey. I'm sure you're now relishing the chance to try this whiskey. So Dave, you're going to do the honours on this one again for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, at the heart of what we do here, innovation is part of that.
Yeah.
And when you think of Method and Madness, for example, that's, you know, dedicated to innovation, experimentation. But you know, all the years that we are looking at different ways of doing things, it's not always just in the micro distillery, I'll put it that way. You know, we look at different mash bills that have been produced over the years. Pot still as we make it today is solely barley, malted, unmalted. But as Kevin said, older mash bills might have included oats or even rye. So it always made up part of a mash bill at some point in Irish history. But the idea of using rye only mash bill as your main ingredients was something new to us, something that we had never done and had no experience in doing. So it was something of a trial over the years, and it challenged, you know, a lot of different departments throughout the distillery, from our analytical, you know, chemical side to the brewing, to distilling, and then deciding on what casks to use. So when it came to Powers Rye, it began a number of years ago, where we had worked with farmers in Wexford to grow rye specifically for us, which we then had some of that malted and then brought on site, and we treated it like our barley. So we put it through the mash filters, we fermented it into a beer, and then we didn't distill it in our pots but in our columns, where we distill our maize for a grain whiskey. And during all that time, there's a lot of trials, a lot of samples, working with the likes of Dagmara Dabrowska in our analytical department, and even with sister distilleries, particularly over in Canada, working with a man by the name of Dr. Don Livermore. And when you think of rye whiskies, you'll always think of North America, you know, Canada and the United States. Rye seems to be something that's very prevalent in their portfolio of whiskies, between Canadian whiskies, bourbons and rye, and sometimes there's a hybrid in the bourbon world where rye is used in their mash bills. So we looked to Don, and he gave us lots of pointers, saying there are certain things to look out for when you're distilling rye in how you handle it, and certain flavour descriptors that you're looking for as well. So clove, I think, would be a big one that we'd find in the new make spirit, which are in the form of compounds referred to as guaiacols and things like that. But we did our research, and what we decided to do was, once we distilled the rye spirit, we aged it in a combination of American barrels. Some would be just arrived in ex-bourbon barrels. Some would be second fill, even third fill bourbon barrels that we're now using ourselves for the second or third time, and some new American virgin oak as well. Because when you think of rye around the world, virgin American oak is normally the predominant cask that rye is in. but we didn't want to just imitate what's out there already. We wanted to put an Irish spin on it. So Irish grown rye, Irish distilled spirit, and then in ex-bourbon barrels, which is how Irish whiskey is mostly aged, and some virgin American casks as well. And that was what became of Powers, or that's how Powers Irish Rye came about.
And we'd some experience previously with Method and Madness, hadn't we?
We had,
Yeah.
and when you think of Method of Madness with rye inclusion, we'd made a pot stilled or a pot distilled spirit,
Yeah.
using a combination of malted barley and rye. Whereas what this is now is 100% rye cereal that's been distilled. Thinking of a brand that was fitting for rye, Powers came to the top very quickly, because when we think of Powers Gold Label and we think of Powers John's Lane, we always consider it a bold, distillate-driven, spicy,
Yeah.
full-bodied whiskey.
Yeah.
And rye is very much distillate-driven, bold and spicy. And it just seemed Powers was the perfect fit.
Match made in heaven.
Match made in heaven.
Nice
and,
connection to Wexford as well.
and a good connection
Nice
to Wexford, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So Eric Ryan, who's kind of our Powers champion, I
Yeah.
refer to him as our ambassador, works with Fimmer Curnow and Kevin in the wood kind of technology side. He had the opportunity to go to the States to spread the good word of Powers Rye. And
Saw the launch there, yeah. The big digital billboards in Times Square
Yeah.
in New York. Very impressive. How did it all go? And
it went amazingly well.
Yeah.
And it's been a credit, the work that Eric and the marketing team have done in the States, because it's driving us on now that rye is a staple in the home of Midleton now. We're producing every year, and long may that last.
and selling really well in the States.
Absolutely. So here this evening, we say we'd share with people not Powers Rye that's on the shelf, but just a cask strength. This is actually one single cask of rye that's been aged in a virgin American barrel.
Okay.
So again, it's like a deconstructed type of element of one of the main components of Powers Rye.
Okay.
Powers Rye on the shelf, kind of out in the world, is at 43.2% ABV.
We're at 59.
And we're at 59.9, so quite
Yeah,
high.
yeah.
And again, we'll try it neat and maybe add some water afterwards. But if you want to have a nose and
Yeah.
see what you think.
What should we be looking out for?
So I think when it comes to spice, think of clove as one of the main markers to really, I suppose, be a good example of a good rye spirit. The fact that it's in a virgin American barrel, there'll be a heightened sense of sweetness on top of that.
Yeah.
So maybe think of caramelic tones, toffee, but also vanilla,
Yeah.
mixed in with that clove spice, first of all.
I get a wonderful clove spice. It's
Clove,
it is, yeah.
kind of fruits people might nearly associate with the likes of banana. Think of rye bread, like
Yeah, I think
confectionery.
baked bread, confectionery.
bread,
Yeah, the baked bread.
The charred barrel, for me, I do get a charred, burnt wood type of character in there at the back, which is quite interesting as well. And if you want to have a taste, and see what you
Please.
think.
Sludge it. Definitely that clove and spice.
Oh, yeah. Peppers.
Yeah.
Peppery.
Yeah.
And kind of like a buttered nature to it as well, kind of creamy, like buttered confectionery, baked goods with that clove spice in the background.
We say pot still is quintessentially Irish and very directly linked to Midleton Distillery. Rye as a whiskey linked closely with the North America.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. As Dave said, it's
Yeah.
very, very popular.
Yeah.
Always has been really in North America and Canada.
I think when you look
but,
at rye
yeah.
whiskies, you'll find most of them coming from North America. But that's not to say it
Popular
can only
anywhere else globally?
be. Hard to say. I think, rye, in my understanding, my very limited understanding, it would have been a cereal brought over by settlers to America, particularly from Scandinavia.
Okay.
It's a hardy cereal. It can grow in conditions less favourable for other cereals. So from a farming point of view, any kind of pioneers going to North America would have brought rye with them. So that was the obvious cereal left over after harvest to distill.
Okay.
And that's how it probably got its foothold in the States, where corn was already prevalent. So when you think of bourbon, like maize, corn and rye would probably be the main cereals along with wheat. So I think when we did our research looking at ryes, you know, that are out there, North America seems to have the majority of them, is fair to say.
Interesting.
But I suppose from my travels and over the last number of years, there's definitely more of an awareness now, you know, be it in Ireland or the UK or Europe, on rye whiskies and appreciation of, I suppose, that spiciness, the extra spiciness, the clove. So it's certainly a lot more prevalent now than just North America or just Canada. Even in Ireland, I know from Eric when he's doing his rounds here and the Powers stuff that, you know, that they really, really love the Powers rye. It's
gaining in popularity.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's very distinctive. It's quite a distinctive taste profile on the nose and on the taste, and people love it. So it's good.
And Dave, you mentioned distilled in the column stills. Another silly question incoming: could it be distilled in the pots? And what would the impact be?
The Method of Madness, for example, that was pot distilled rye and malt. So you could. It's just a different technique of doing it. You're going to get a different aromas and flavors. But I suppose there's quite a difference between this now and, for example, the rye and malt, where you have rye and malt, whereas this is 100% rye. And I suppose this has a lot more intensity of spices and particularly clove and that sort of baked bread. Whereas if you go to the rye and malt that we did in the micro distillery, for example, it's quite a different taste profile. The spices are a little bit more subtle, I would have to say, a little bit more subtle. Doesn't have as much of the clove. And again, because you're adding in malt, it's quite different. But to answer your question, you could do both. Yeah.
Okay. It's really good.
Yeah.
I've actually added a bit of water in mine there now as well, and it just really opens it up. Actually, the oak becomes more prominent straight away.
Anything coming down the line for Powers that you can?
Again, it's on a need-to-know basis, John. Unfortunately, Christmas hasn't come yet for you. I think, you know, with the 7 brands we produce, there's always a pipeline for everything.
Yeah.
How soon something will come out or not is really up to the markets and the willingness to take on a new extension of a brand. So there's kind of elements to that aren't really seen at the forefront of things as well. But no, Powers, like, you know, with Jameson, Redbreast and the Pogue, everything does work in the background all the time. But the timelines for the fruition of that work to come is the one it's the part that's unknown, I suppose is the best way to put it.
You're keeping that well under wraps, aren't you? You're dead right. Throughout Barrel Club and the journey we've been on together, we've always tried to showcase a wide variety of whiskies from Midleton Distillery and the collection here in innovative and interesting ways, as the guys have covered. So if this Powers Rye is to your liking, you can try it, as Dave mentioned, bottled at 43.2% ABV, delivered from our home to yours through our website, MidletonDistilleryCollection.com. And I mentioned the word journey all the way through today. What a journey it has been over the past 2.5 years. I can't quite believe that we are on to our last featured bottle in the Barrel Club series, and we're certainly ending on a high with our hero bottle in the pack, and you guys have pulled out all the stops. I know when we had a conversation a good number of months ago, Kevin, you certainly wanted to make sure that we were going to end on that high, and I think you've achieved that. It's our Green Spot Chateau Montelena Single Pot Still Irish Whiskey at cask strength. To tell us more about the pot still range and to take us through the tasting, Kevin, I think you're going to help us out in that regard. Can I ask you, what was the genesis of the Chateau Montelena project?
Yeah, so I suppose, look, we really wanted to finish on a high, as you said, and we spoke about this a number of months ago. And I suppose this is a very, very special whiskey. And I suppose it's one of my, favourite projects over the last 10 or 15 years. The whole collaboration with wineries and stuff, which I'll explain in a few minutes. So I think it's very, very special. So it's great to finish on this whiskey. So just, I suppose, about spots, and people out there maybe have heard lots about the spot whiskies. Very much linked to the Mitchells in Dublin, the Mitchell, which are, you know, the wine family in Dublin. And going back to the 1800s, you know, the Mitchells used to import wine casks from around Europe, be it fortified wine or wine casks. And, you know, these wine casks then, what they used to do was to send them up to Bow Street to fill them with, you know, Jameson whiskey. And then they used to bring them back to their cellars.
Underground,
Fitzwilliam Lane, for example. And then they used to, you know, put their barrels in there, their casks. And then they used to mark their barrels depending on the aging potential.
With the dots.
With a dot, so hence the little dab of paint here. You can see it here. So we had Green Spot, which was, you know, 10. Blue Spot, which is 7. Green Spot, which is 10. Yellow Spot, which is 12. And then Red Spot was 15. And as I mentioned earlier on, over the years between sort of 1920 and 1930 up to the 1950s and 60s, some of the spots started disappearing. I think particularly around the 50s and 60s, Yellow Spot disappeared, Blue Spot disappeared, and Red Spot disappeared. So those spots, and so the last spot remaining into the 80s was actually Green Spot. And along with Redbreast, they were the last 2 remaining single pot still whiskies. And we're here talking tonight about single pot still whiskies. If you look back to the 70s, there was only 2 remaining single pot stills, and that was Green Spot and Redbreast.
And was that due to popularity and changing taste?
Yeah, changing taste, and you know, I suppose, look, things changed because of Irish whiskey. It was on the decline from the 20s and 30s onwards, and there just wasn't the demand for whiskies, and it all faded. You know, so that was the last one that was left. So I suppose then, and you know, in the 90s, then there was I suppose, a concentration on bringing the spots back into the 2000s. And then I suppose the first one we worked on was Yellow Spot. And we put together, I suppose, we reimagined a Yellow Spot. And in the Yellow Spot case, we used Malaga wines, which is sweet wine, fortified wines from Spain. So Yellow Spot was the first one we brought back. Then we brought back Red Spot, and then we brought back Blue Spot there a number of years ago. So now the family are reunited again.
Thank God.
Okay, thank God. So that's the Spot range, which, you know, just a wonderful range of whiskies. And I suppose the key to it all is the different types of casks that we use for maturing the Spot range. Typically for, you know, Green Spot, it's ex-American bourbon barrels and Oloroso sherry. For Yellow Spot, we have ex-American bourbon barrels, Oloroso sherry and Malaga. For Blue Spot, we use Madeira casks. So you have ex-American, you have ex-Oloroso, and you have Madeira. And then the Red Spot, you have ex-American, ex-Oloroso, and Marsala. Okay, so I suppose the key thing there is that because of the use of different fortified wines and the different styles, that gives you your different flavour profile.
Okay, so they all
as well as
influence.
the ages.
Yeah.
They have a big influence,
Yeah.
absolutely. So to move it a step further, but maybe 10, 12 years ago, we were looking at innovations in terms of the Spot range, particularly with Green Spot. And I suppose we came up with the idea then, after a number of innovation sessions, that because of the link to wine and wine casks and the Mitchells, wouldn't it be great to work with you know, wine families and actually collaborate with maybe wine families from around the world. And that's where we come up with the idea of, well, why don't we collaborate with Irish wine families from around the world? And they're called the wine geese. That they immigrated back in the 1600s and 1700s to various places around the world, and even into the 1800s. So that was kind of the genesis of the idea. Okay, we're going to do collaborations. It's going to be with wine families, and it's going to be with Irish wine families. That's the connection. So hence the launch of the Green Spot, I suppose, wine geese project. Yeah. So then I started to work with a guy called Ted Murphy, who wrote a very special book called The Kingdom of Wine.
Oh,
yeah, you have it there.
There we go. I think we have that.
That's Ted's book, and Ted actually signed that book for me.
You had that signed.
So Ted was, you know, has a huge knowledge of the wine geese and the various Irish families, had a lot of connection. So I met Ted a number of times, and we sat down and we went through options of, well, who could we collaborate with, and I think actually we have some footage there of Ted going back some years ago, which is really interesting.
Why don't we hear from Ted?
Wine geese is a name given to the immigrant Irish families who from the 18th century on engaged in the wine trade in the various countries of their adoption around the world. In any book dealing with the great wines of the world, you'll find the Bartons. I mean, they are renowned throughout the world of wine. Oh, they're immensely proud of their Irish background. I had a letter from Anthony recently, and I hadn't seen him for a while, and he said, "Ted, when are you coming to Bordeaux to drink some Irish wine with me?"
Green Spot, it's a very special whiskey. It's a classic single pot still whiskey that's been around for over 100 years. Traditionally, it's matured in a selection of bourbon and sherry casks, but we wanted to try something different. I got in contact with Ted Murphy about 5 years ago to find out more about the story of the wine geese. Ted introduced me to the Barton family in Bordeaux, and that's when we came up with the idea of finishing our whiskey in French wine casks. Well, we had a feeling that the French wine casks and the part they play in creating the wine's distinctive balance, bouquet and flavour will give our whiskey a taste, nose and finish equally as distinctive. The collaboration with Louisville Barton was just perfect for us. It wasn't just the wine's reputation that attracted us, it was also the fact that the seeds of its success were quite literally sown by an Irishman, Thomas Barton from County Fermanagh. And that lineage continues today with Anthony and Lillian Barton.
We're very conscious that there's a definite attachment to the quality behind making whiskey. So, you know, we make an effort at the quality here, and you make an effort of the quality back in Ireland to make the Green Spot. So that's all very exciting.
So after we shipped over the first batch of wine casks to Midleton, we started working on them straight away. We filled them with 7 to 10-year-old Green Spot whiskey and left them to mature for up to 24 months. Along the way we tested, and when it's got just the right amount of wine seasoning, what we call the wine finish, we bottle it.
Incredible, and really sadly Ted is no longer with us. We're raising a glass to him this evening.
Absolutely, yeah. So yeah, this project would never have happened without Ted. He was just a wonderful guide and a help and connection to all the families, and it was brilliant. Yeah. So great, fantastic,
and a brilliant book.
A great book.
And come here, what have you highlighted here? There's something in there.
Yeah, I'll maybe just explain that in a few minutes. There's a few stories here from the book, but so I suppose the first family through Ted that we worked with was the Bartons. And that's when we came up with Green Spot, Louisville Barton, and Lillian and Damien Barton, and to this day we still have a wonderful collaboration. They call over to Midleton now and again, and we go to France. So that's a permanent expression.
Oh, was that the first in the series?
That was the first in the series. Yeah. So Louisville Barton was the first one. So then I suppose following the success of Louisville Barton, and people loved it. Particularly, I suppose, the fruit contribution of that whiskey from the wine barrels. We started saying, okay, well, where do we go next? And you know, we had Bordeaux, Saint-Julien, where the Bartons are based, and we decided then maybe just go to the New World. And again, spoke to Ted, and he alerted me to a tasting that was going on in Ballymaloo, actually, out the road there, a number of years ago, and it was going to be done by Bo Barrett from Chateau Montelena, which is leading me on to this whiskey eventually. We'll get there. So I went to Ballymaloo, met Bo Barrett, and I suppose to cut a long story short, we started exchanging emails and eventually started exchanging barrels. You know, he sent over some barrels to us for trial, and again built up a great relationship with Bo and Matt, the winemaker in Montelena. I went over there just to visit, again to build up the relationship, and wonderful family to work with. And that's really the genesis of how we came up with Green Spot Chateau Montelena. Just I suppose as another story, the winery itself is a very, very famous winery in Napa Valley, in Calistoga in Napa. And Bo's father, Jim Barrett, was I suppose he purchased the vineyard, the winery in 1973. And Jim's parents, or Bo's grandparents, his mother was from County Kerry, Sneem in County Kerry, and his grandfather was from Waterford. So it was a very, very close link here to Ireland. And to this day, Bo, he visited here last year, and he's very, very, you know, close to Ireland.
Brilliant.
He loves Ireland.
Brilliant.
And in fact, I have a quotation here from Jim Barrett, Bo's father, from the book. And Jim Barrett proudly declared, "I am as Irish as the potato, and this sense of pride is humorously reflected on a sign in Chateau Montelena's car park, which reads, 'Car park for Irish only, others will be towed away.'" And I can vouch for that because, you know, I was actually there, and there's actually a sign at the car park.
And it exists.
And it exists. And it exists. So, so loves his Irish connection. And I suppose the whole thing about Green Spot Chateau Montelena, and indeed Green Spot Louisville Barton initially, was the connection between, you know, the Mitchells, the history of the Mitchells and importing wine casks, Irish distillers who produce the whiskey, and then the individual family winery who have Irish connections. And I just think the whole thing just comes together wonderfully well. It's fantastic.
Amazing.
But just to add again, sorry, Jim Barrett, when he purchased the winery in 1973, he set about, I suppose, transforming the winery, got in a winemaker, and there was a very famous wine competition in 1976 in Paris. And up to that point, the wines of France were deemed, you know, top of the range, unbeatable in competitions.
Yeah.
And so the judgment of Paris took place, and lo and behold, the white wine that won was a Chardonnay from Chateau Montelena in 1976.
Wow.
So basically within 3 to 4 years, they went from, you know, buying the winery, transforming it, to winning the judgment of Paris. So again, it's an incredible story, amazing.
Quality, quality, quality.
Yeah, and that's there to this day with Bo and his team and Matt. Yeah,
Brilliant.
Absolutely.
And tell me, do we send our barrels over?
No, so they use French oak.
Yeah.
I suppose, you know, fine French oak, and they mature their wines, and it's a Zinfandel wine.
Okay.
So they, you know, previously with Louisville Barton, it would have been Cab Sauv that would have been the predominant grape. So we wanted something different. So here we have Zinfandel, which would be very prevalent in Napa and, you know, that region in America. So Zinfandel grape, and they use French oak, and then what they do is after their maturation of their wines, they send the barrels over to us.
Okay.
So what we do then is that we take a batch of Green Spot, which has been previously matured in ex-American barrels and Oloroso. So we disgorge or prepare a batch of Green Spot, and then what we do is we finish that Green Spot, right, in the Chateau Montelena barrels for about 1 to 2 years, okay? And during those 1 to 2 years then, it picks up the wine contribution, and we'll see that in a minute. And that's really how we produce Montelena. The other thing to note is that, you know, the standard Chateau Montelena, which you can buy in your off the shelf, is at 46%.
Yeah.
So uniquely tonight and exclusive
Yeah.
to the Barrett Club, this is actually cask strength.
Wow.
So this is something that nobody can get anywhere.
Wow.
So it's very special.
At 59.5.
Yeah. So this is it's coming in at 59.5%.
Yeah. So
cask strength Chateau Montelena from Napa Valley. So something very special. So we have
you're like a young Santa Claus now. You are with this gift. Incredible. Thank you. Thank you.
So So just have a nose. So up front for me, again, that sort of the fruits, I get, you know, just a hint of strawberry, maybe raspberry, cherries. It has that lovely fruit contribution, which is coming from that Zinfandel grape and Zinfandel wine up front.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the first thing for me.
Like a jam, kind of common.
Yeah.
Are we getting cinnamon again?
Little touch of cinnamon, but then you get I get sort of toasted oak. Little hint of maybe toffee and some caramel.
Red apple type of caramel.
Red apple, but again, that fruit keeps coming through. Different types of fruits coming through now. So yeah, so it's just a really, really rich nose. I think it's important to say as well, John, that for this particular whiskey, we selected 2 casks. One was a first fill Chateau Montelena cask, which had quite a significant wine contribution. I suppose it's worth noting as well the colour. You know, you kind of get a deep colour, sometimes almost like a kind of a copper hue from the wine barrels. But we also combined that then with a second filled cask as well. So we wanted to balance the wine contribution with the oak, with the whiskey, and get the whole thing working in harmony. Yeah. And that's why we picked 2 casks. Together, yeah. Two barrels married together. So it's just really, really, really nice. And again, you go back to it again, that fruit just stands out for me, the raspberry, almost like a raspberry tartlet. Maybe a little touch of pear as well there, and apple.
Sweet pear again.
The apple is kind of coming through. So we have a taste.
Please, launch it. What an exceptional whiskey to go out on.
Now on the taste, nice bit of sweetness, but again, I get some toffee. I get the fruit coming through, maybe pear, apple, very juicy. You know, you feel luscious and juicy.
Mouth-watering.
Really mouth-watering. Absolutely. Just fills up the whole mouth.
And those fruits linger as well. It's lovely.
And again, it moves on. Again, I go back to kind of maybe a barley cereal note again at the end, but it's really, really delicious. Something really, really special.
It has a finish like a wine.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Just add a little touch of water. Just bring it down a bit. And we'll see what that does for it. All right, okay, it's quite different. Again, more fruits, probably more toffee and coffee. I'd say kind of roasted coffee notes. You see, it has changed quite a bit.
Yeah, the berry fruits are there, but the oak seems to have kind of come a bit more to the forefront.
So really, really nice taste again. Launch it. So look, as we taste that, I mean, just the whole project. We also had a third, we was mentioned as well, which was Quail's Gate, which is from Canada. Yeah. That was launched there last year. That was a Pinot Noir wine, and again gave us a different flavour profile as well. So look, really, the whole project has been wonderful, and I suppose the families that we work with as well. There's a sense of pride. I know, but Bo was very, very, very proud of this whiskey, and he talks about it quite a bit. So it's really great.
I think it ties in again back to relationships.
With Paco and the family and some of our other partners,
just a different element to it. But again, if it wasn't for the relationships, you know, we wouldn't have what we have here. So,
but it's a great story to tell in terms of the origins and the Wine Geese series, and
it's absolutely, it's brilliant. I suppose it's suffice to say that, you know, we're working away over the next number of years on different projects with Green Spot. So.
Can't
tell you here.
He gave me the side eye there.
I had to
don't ask.
So it's great.
Yeah, I was going to say what else is coming, but sure, you know.
Yeah, there's no point asking.
Do nothing till you hear more.
So look, I hope everybody enjoyed it at home.
What a way to conclude. Number 10.
Number 10.
Yeah, incredible. And that more or less brings to an end our tasting. Thanks a million to everybody at home who hit play. We hope you've enjoyed as much as we have and discovered more about the whiskies from our Midleton Distillery collection. Once again, we'd like to sincerely thank you for joining us throughout this incredible journey over the last couple of years. A special thanks to Kevin and Dave for taking us through the 4 very special whiskies in our pack. And I just want to say personally, you've given an awful lot of time, both in terms of curating each of these packs and the whiskies, and there's a lot of love, dedication and care and teamwork that goes into preparing each of the 10. Your generosity with your time across the virtuals. You're busy traveling, you're busy on the day job, as we say, and your families as well. So greatly appreciate the time that you've afforded all of our Barrel Club members throughout. Special acknowledgement also to our other colleagues and friends who joined us across those 10 shows. We had great fun, great crack throughout in different locations. Billy and Deirdre and Carol, Tommy, Catherine, Matthew, Aaron, Ger, Eva, Finbar, Aoife, Eric, Derek, Barry, Willie, Roisin, Kevin Rowan, and I know I've missed somebody. I know I have. Also to the production crews behind the scenes. These shows don't happen by themselves, so there's an awful lot of work and preparation goes in, so a huge thank you. And of course to the teams here in Midleton and our team in Jameson Distillery, Bow Street, for always hosting us so warmly and graciously. And all that's left for me to say is to wish you a very happy Christmas and best wishes for the new year. And I think it's only fitting that as our face of Barrel Club, Kevin, I leave you with the final reflection as we depart after 10 wonderful drops.
Yeah, it's been a great journey, John. I great memories. I remember the first one in the cooperage, which was a Spanish oak theme with Dave and Deirdre.
Yep.
And that was our very first one, and we were all nervous. Well, I was nervous that night. So it went really well. So that was great memories. That was the first one. I do remember doing one in the micro distillery.
In the winter.
I think it was Method of Madness, and it was winter time.
And you could see your breath.
And that was very cold. That stands out as well.
Can I just tell you about that one? I don't want to mention the COVID word, but I was due down with you, and I literally 2 days before got COVID. I had to send an SOS, and Tommy Byrne.
Tommy stepped in.
Yeah, he stepped in. He was amazing, and I remember watching it live, and the breath coming off your
well, we didn't get COVID after it, but we could have got pneumonia. I think. But again, that stands out, and some of the trips to Bow Street. And again, the help we got from everybody, you know, the crew at Midleton, yourself, John, Tommy, lots of people have helped out, all the people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It's been a great journey, great fun. I suppose the most important thing for us is that people at home, you know, learned about whiskey, appreciated what we do. What we try to do here at these shows is just maybe explain how we produce whiskies and the craft and the love that goes into them. And the time and the attention to detail. I mean, that's what we try to get across. And I suppose, look, the important thing with whiskey, like tonight, is that I hope people are at home enjoying it with their friends, and that's what whiskey is about. Enjoying it, conviviality, and enjoying the moment. And that's really it. So look, for me, just thanks to everybody at home. It's been a great journey. Really has. Very enjoyable. And I suppose the saying goes that, look, you know, don't be sad it's over. Just be glad we're on the journey. That's the most important thing.
Brilliant.
So I'd say, look, thanks very much.
Yeah, no, thank you. Sláinte here, and thanks, gents, and everybody at home. Sláinte, good evening, and wishing you a very Merry Christmas. Take care.
Sláinte.
Sláinte. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Well done, Dave.
Kevin.